Welcome, listeners, to www.ironradio.org, the website and podcast for all things strength sports and sports nutrition. Thanks for listening.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Iron Radio. This is Phil Stevens. I'm a strength coach, youth football coach, powerlifter, Highland Games athlete.
Nice. This is Dr. Mike Nelson, associate professor at the Carrick Institute, and now will be author for Human Kinetics and a book on metabolic flexibility, so that'll be fun. And also the physiologic flexibility certification, just sort of relevant to the topic today, opens up September 18th through September 25th.
Woohoo!
Yeah.
This is Coach Durrell out of Strength Guild in Kansas City. Well, today I'll be a strongman coach if we don't get rained out, that is. We'll see how that goes. Other than that, I'm on the facility here, Strength Guild, and have a competitive weightlifting team under the same name.
There you go.
All right. And this is Lonnie Lowry. I'm an industry and academic consultant, former competitive bodybuilder. I apologize in advance, everybody, if you hear a bunch of blowing in the background. I got the AC cranking. That's going to be part of our topic today. But because I thought, in the past, sometimes I've turned it off. But with the humidity being this bad, I'm like, no, I'm sorry. I'm just going to apologize and leave it on because it's hideous. Oh, yeah. In the science news, I got one thing here. I alluded to this in a previous week. It's just a little eye rolling. We were talking about, I think it was berberine and how it's not Ozempic. Well, this is more stuff. And I'm always on the lookout for a new herb or something cool. Don't get me wrong. Malatus furtianus, if I'm pronouncing that right, a tropical plant found in China, fights fat in tests. Let me just read you some of these headlines. Tropical plant native to China could be key to beating the obesity epidemic.
Wow.
Tropical plant in China contains anti-obesity properties. Tropical plant may offer natural anti-obesity treatment. Tackling fat with food. Tropical plant in China has anti-obesity properties. And it just goes on. And this is all over the news, and it's a chance to be a curmudgeon again. It's just, when you look at this, I just see mouse study, single mouse study, handful of mouse studies. So how they go from a handful of mouse studies, and I want to look at the mechanism of all this, like how it might work. But key to beating the obesity epidemic on a handful of mouse studies, this is the problem. That title's from Pacific Daily News. Usually you'll get headlines from Science Daily that are a little bit more responsible, like it says, reveals anti-obesity potential, that kind of stuff. Yeah, we really need to be careful with this because, huge list of headlines for this Malatus furtianus, and based on not nearly enough. We were talking the other day about what's your standard of evidence before you put something into practice. This is not it, everybody. A handful of mouse studies is not it. To make this a productive conversation, I would just ask you guys what you have done, like in an herbal way. Again, not even looking into the mechanism of this yet, because there just doesn't seem to be a preponderance of evidence. Certainly not, consensus in human clinical trials or anything like that. But let me ask, Mike, have you heard of this stuff? MALLOT?
No.
Yeah.
What was the mechanism, did they say?
No, I haven't even looked that far. I wrote mice, exclamation. And that in itself is not bad if that kind of preclinical work leads to clinical work, but to have headlines like this.
And I'm sometimes okay with those headlines if the article's at least fair, but 99 times out of 100, the article's worse than the headline.
Yeah, a bunch of hyperbole.
Yeah.
What have you done, Mike? What would you suggest to a client, or what have you probably experimented with a bunch of different herbal stuff?
Yeah, like we talked before the show, the old stimulant-based ones worked. The Maohung and, ephedra, the Twin Lab Rip Fuel and all the all the early stimulant stuff. And then you had the supposed DMAA and its other derivatives were from geranium oil, but that was 100% completely manufactured. So there was no real truth to that. Non-stimulant stuff, not much, I would say, has really moved the needle, other than, like we talked about before the show, some of the diuretic or laxative effects, which are interesting but temporary. The only things I would say in that category that I think may have some benefit, capsaicin keeps showing up now and again. If you look at the human studies on that, which generally are with other ingredients, so it's hard to pull apart, maybe a single-digit percentage, maybe. It's stimulates the TRVP1 receptor. So capsaicin, as people know, is this spicy, you can feel on your tongue. There's some stuff with New Zealand blackberry seed extract that does increase fat oxidation. There's about 2 or 3 studies on that in humans. That's on my list to try to reproduce to see if there's anything there. Again, was it statistically significant? Yes. Is it pretty small? Yes. I mean, you're still talking, single-digit percentages, but for something that's not a stimulant, that's probably the highest I've seen. Some debatable stuff on EGCG, green tea. And then there's some interesting data, although it's not an herb, it's actually a carotenoid on astaxanthin. But if you're looking at compounds that are not stimulant-based. But in terms of other herbal stuff, I haven't seen much. And then the bodybuilding lore, the kind of glucose disposal agent thing always keeps showing up. But I always wonder, where does the glucose go? Where if it goes out of the bloodstream, then what did you do with it? Did you convert it via DNL to fat? That doesn't seem good. Did you force it into a muscle that doesn't want any more glucose? I don't know. That whole story always seems weird to me.
Did you get diabetic high blood glucose and end up in your urine? Yeah, that didn't work.
Yeah, did you piss it out? Where did it go?
Yeah. No, it's a good point about the stimulant stuff. I mean, painting with a broad brush, but I think we probably all agree. A lot of the same stuff that's pre-workout, or it's also the fat loss category, and it's usually stimulant by nature because that stuff kills your appetite. I mean, they said 50% of the effects of ephedra, like the Mahuang and stuff you're talking about, were anorectic type effects, not just thermogenic. Yeah, so if it's not thermogenic or stimulant, I'm going to be pretty skeptical, I think.
And plus, I think on those things, if you, as we all know, if you really drop your calories hard, your NEAT, so non-exercise activity thermogenesis, just how much you move around just goes in the toilet. And so I think those stimulants also help trying to keep that a little bit higher. So you actually are just doing more movement. So I don't know how much of that is a real increase in metabolism. The studies on that, at least with RMR, are very, very slight. But like you said, I think it works because you move around more and you're just not as hungry.
I do think we need to tease apart the different stimulants. I mean, because there was the stuff synephrine, the bitter orange, green orange stuff. I always felt like that was more side effects than it was main effect. The
main effect was very, very small.
Yeah, it was a weak excuse to replace ephedra, which you're not going to, in my opinion. You're just not going to. That kind of stuff. I mean, the ephedrine hydrochloride was in every gas station across this country for a reason. I'm not saying stimulants are all safe. Like I said, some are more toxicity and side effect than they are main effect. But I do think we need to tease apart the different effects of what they do, whether it's cognitively or, I don't know, on a heart rate, blood pressure, whatever, because they are different things, Mm-hmm. Phil, you mentioned the teas and stuff. Why did you try those? Just to?
I don't remember. I think I first tried it when I was in Asia.
Oh, God.
You'd go in the little stores and see it all, like weight loss tea. It's like, let me see what this does. And basically you just shit yourself. And people think it's amazing. Well, I mean, the Asians are into all kinds of weird stuff, though. Like you see desiccated bull testicles and all kinds of weird things. Rattles.
The weightlifting team swears by turtle heart soup.
Oh, there you go. Turtle heart soup. But the Asians are brutal, man. They'll eat anything. Got a big dolphin thing this week. We're just gonna go get dolphins and whales and eat them, and anything. That's the weird stuff. But
I do remember being in Japan, and there was ridiculous numbers of energy drinks that I couldn't read.
Oh, yeah.
Right, and I'm just like, wow, I grabbed a couple just because. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, we've got our usual brands here, but it just seemed like this bewildering array of stuff, and I'm like, what's in all these?
Well, yeah, that was the fun part, though. Like
Yeah.
even like when I was in Thailand, even what did they call it? It's like the tiger balm that people put on.
Yeah,
You know, you
yeah.
can fight like over there's no regulation of it, and like all the Thai fighters are rubbed. Like it was fucking hot. You know, they just had no regulation of how much they could put in there, so they could just load things out. You put that stuff on, and oh my god. So, and I think like Mike was talking about, that was the other thing. I mean, I always claimed when I lived in Thailand that everybody was so skinny because how spicy the food was. Like you were just constantly eating capsaicin in everything. Yeah. So your metabolism was just on fire because you were just cooking from the inside out. It was like having DMAA, but it was food. You know? Your body was running at 105 degrees, or DNP, yeah. Running at 105 degrees all the time. So, and I mean,
it's 105 degrees outside.
That's what I was going to say. You're also just sweating. Like when I lived there, you had to shower 3 times a day.
Yeah.
It's just so nasty. But,
oh man, I remember that from Thailand. Like,
yes.
I remember somebody saying, just get used to your dress shirt being drenched. I'm like, gross. You know,
it was bad. So living there a year, there was 2 seasons. There was hot and wet and hot and dry. It was the only place I've ever been. There was like 105 and pouring rain. Like 7 inches of rain today, and it's 105. It's like, oh man. But yeah,
Ohio feels like that this summer.
Yeah.
Almost. Yeah, that's all I've got. Other than one bit of sort of listener news. Lonnie Ducote came out, and he's our first supporting member in our new batch. We just reopened. Hey, let's do supporting members, or kind of invigorating the podcast and stuff like that. So shout out to him. He's even going to help with some co-hosting stuff on Nutrition Radio that I usually record after this. So you are appreciated, my man.
Yeah, he's always backed us. From like day one.
Day one.
Yep.
Right.
I have a question for you, Lonnie and Mike, just about supplements in general that you would, even indirectly for fat loss, like, is there anything indirectly that you would at least include in the mix of, and it doesn't necessarily have to be related to the direct mechanism of fat loss, but maybe even something with, I don't know, a mental trigger or something like that you would include in the list of curiosity, at least, besides, what you guys listed there for the direct fat loss stuff?
Oh, I haven't seen a lot of stuff like, other than the ones I mentioned, that have a direct fatty acid oxidation perspective. Lonnie can talk about caffeine too. Caffeine generally increases lipolysis, so you will liberate more fat. You will do a little bit more work. I know there was a meta-analysis showing that it did increase fatty acid oxidation, but I don't know if I quite buy that yet. I'm still on the fence about that.
Mike, I do if the intensity is right.
If it increases your output, I would say yes.
Because some of those studies are like, they got people running at 80% of their max, their VO2 max kind of thing. Right. You're like, oh, it's increased fat oxidation. Well, no shit.
Well, yeah, you did more output.
yeah. I mean, you've crossed over to carb use at that point. I think, and that's going to overwhelm a lot of, like, the epinephrine you're dumping and everything else. I don't know. There was some stuff about pyruvate. That's a weird, different kind of mechanism. I don't think that ever amounted to much, and it was really expensive. But there was different fats. There's some stuff about omega-3s probably help in the long run. Eric Noreen, guy I've known for a long time, he's an old doc student buddy of mine. He did some interesting stuff on that. Some studies will show a decrease in RER, right? More fat oxidation. Some will show fat loss effects, possibly from other mechanisms. There's always that inflammation connection, with body fat. So things that are anti-inflammatory, like fish oils, might help there. I did my dissertation on CLA. That is still sold, which blows my mind.
Yeah.
The animal studies are absolutely remarkable. Mike and I have talked about this a million times over the years, but animals will lose like half their body fat in like 2 months or something. It's insane.
Yeah.
And that does not have muscle. Yeah. I actually looked at it as an anti-catabolic because there was some interesting things about reducing the catabolic response. Leah Wiggum, she's from up in Wisconsin area, did a couple reviews or meta-analyses on CLA and said, it probably leads to another pound or two of fat loss over a 12 or 15-week stretch. It was really probably not worth it. But I do think the fat proportions in your diet do play a role I mean, Americans live on these pro-inflammatory omega-6 fats, in my opinion, and a lot of saturated fats, and some different from others. You can't even paint with a broad brush like this anymore. Polyunsaturates are good, and saturated fats are bad. You can't even talk like that anymore. But yeah, I think the kind of fats in your diet, I think that might be something behind a lot of what you see about the highly processed foods or junk foods being so bad, is probably because of the junk fats that are part of that. Not to mention the the low fiber and the refined carbs and all the kind of mix that they have going on. But that's a good question about what else would you do? I would just, if it's not stimulant in nature, I personally wouldn't. I would be very skeptical of it, I guess.
Yeah.
Two, I would add real quick is, like I said, astaxanthin maybe in high doses. There's some more human studies coming out on that. And then L-carnitine, which has been around forever, which I early in the day looked at and kind of dismissed. But there's a Wynn Greenhoff study where they gave them 80 grams of carbohydrates, and they were able to see more L-carnitine in the muscle. They didn't look at any oxidation studies. There are athletes who are drug tested, which again, I'm not recommending people do this, but they have used injectable L-carnitine, and anecdotally, that seems to make a big difference. My buddy Dan Gardner talked about, if you look at the oral conversion to what people have used for the injectable version, you could play around with an oral version of probably 3 to 4 grams or higher of L-carnitine and see if it helps. There's some interesting stuff related to testosterone and androgenic upregulation and some other stuff. So it's kind of an indirect pathway, but yeah, that one I'd say is a maybe, but it'd be interesting to see a study using the oral form at a high dose.
With stimulants, like how much has there ever been a study done that compares like the direct fat burning of stimulants versus how much of it is it just that you have energy in a hypocaloric state? Like you take ephedra and you're sitting there bouncing. Like your NEPA goes through the fucking roof.
Oh, yeah.
Because you're just active. So how much is the compound actually burning fat, or it's just making you be active in a time where you, like, if you're in a serious calorie deficit, normally you'd turn into a slug. But it allows you to, I gotta move. So like you have 10 hours of just moving that you wouldn't. So.
I think it's kind of two sides of the same coin. As a stimulant, it's going to be a neuromuscular and a neuroendocrine kind of thing. So it's just going to get you revving. And that's going to make you, bob your knee. I know in those studies we did with Starbucks Sevilla, although the subjects miraculously, it's not like they all knew they were on the placebo or not, because it's hard to blind those studies. But the student researchers were all laughing. It was so obvious, to your point, that people that were on the 2 packs of Real Via, they're bobbing their knees, they're talking like an auctioneer. You're wired. Geez. And you're right. I think a lot of it is sort of that kind of muscle tension, muscle output, and
it'd be
not just mitochondrial,
It'd be a damn near impossible study to do. I mean, you basically have to load people up with stimulants and have one group like strapped to a chair and the other group let them move around and see what happens.
Yeah.
You have these people all jacked up on stimulants and, okay, don't move. We got to see what happens. The only way
you can get at it, like you said, is looking at RMR, right? So resting metabolic rate. And I think, what was one of the early ephedra studies? Is it Boozer et al., I think, did it for NIH. It was supposed to be the main study to actually, the FDA wanted to pull ephedra, and it turned out the study was actually positive and the side effects were minimal. But I believe they did RMR in that study, and I want to say it was increased, but it was, again, like a single-digit percentage. And if you extrapolate that out, it was a relatively minor component of the overall fat loss.
Yeah. Frank and Vic Katz did that book, The Fidget Factor, years ago. And it tried to address this in a sort of a indirect way. I just pulled it up on Amazon. Fidget Factor, easy way to burn up to 1,000 extra calories a day. Because I think they're talking about, you're chewing gum, you're bobbing your knee, you're just antsy, you're tapping your knuckles, all this stuff, you're clenching your jaw. All these things add up.
It's Levine's work, Yeah.
Yeah, I wish there was more that wasn't stimulant in nature. Honestly, to Gerald's point, I would focus on your macros. Protein is the most thermogenic of the macros. It's the least likely well, let's just say to be fattening, if you will, the least likely to be lipogenic. I mean, look at cultures that eat lots and lots of meat and very little other things. They're ripped to shreds. Mm-hmm. So there's like epidemiological evidence to this, and there's resting metabolic rate stuff about, how it jacks up your metabolism in a good way, in an upward direction. The thermic effect of protein is on the order of like 20% versus 6 or 8 for the other macros. So, and it's the most satiating. So, manipulating macros would be my other approach, I would think, that might actually have an outcome.
Yeah, and I would throw in just simple step count, which I'm sure you guys are already doing. I'm working on a book with 2 other people about that too. But if you look at other cultures, I won't say what, we have it in the book, but there's some cultures that eat a lot of food and not super high quality and are very lean, but their output, they don't formal exercise, they don't go to the gym and lift, but their total movement throughout the day is extremely high.
Yeah.
What the average step count now is like, maybe 4,000 for an average American. So yeah, just walking more makes a big difference.
I was going to say, that's the same thing that I've tried to explain people here in the Midwest for years. Like, in general, the Midwest was the first place that became obese in the nation. Like, it used to be, I would leave Kansas and go to the coast, and people would get leaner as you visit the coast. But a lot of it was just lifestyle here. The Midwest went from an agricultural farming lifestyle to not in a generation. But their eating habits, they all ate like their grandpa. They all ate like their grandpa that used to work in the field for 12 hours a day. But they didn't work in the field 12 hours a day. So it's they passed on their eating habits, like big breakfast, big lunch, bacon, and all of a sudden they're 100 pounds overweight. Well, I wonder why. You're eating like grandpa did, but you're doing 1/10 of his work.
Yeah.
Phil, that's the same thing you see in former lifters, and my brother was kind of like that.
Yeah.
He still eats like a bulking permabulker bodybuilder, and it's like, your joints are shot like mine are now, man. You can't keep doing that.
Exactly.
Yep. But you know what? Frank and Vic Catch, actually, we just talked about those guys. They're sort of founding fathers in exercise science, but they tried to answer the question at least a little bit in one of their ex-phys books. They've done a lot of weight management, ex-phys kind of textbook stuff about, do we eat more or do we move less, in your point? And the answer is yes, right?
Yeah.
We do eat more. And in fact, it looked like women actually have increased their calories more than men, if I recall that. I have to go look at those data. But also what you said, labor isn't labor anymore. And that's happened relatively quickly.
Well, even the farmers. Even farmers
now compared to the past.
Literally, I got to ride in a combine. A buddy of mine has 5,000 acres, and he let me ride his combine. You don't even have to run it. Basically, they have a person sitting. It's all GPS ran. They just have a person sitting in it to make sure it doesn't fuck up.
Oh my God, they don't even steer.
They don't even steer anything. You just push a button, you lay down the track, and they're just sitting in there watching TV and making sure it doesn't go off track. That's it. So, our world has become, the activity level that we have to do has become nil.
Yeah, look at the self-driving cars and trucks and stuff. I know that's got a bumpy start, but that's going to happen.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
And we're going to end up like Wall-E, like we said before. We don't even need muscles and bones anymore. We're just floating brains. I don't know.
Yeah, when I was up in Montana doing that seminar with Gabby and Sean, I rented a new Kia, and it had self-drive. And I let that thing ride me through the mountains. Holy shit, that was scary. It was turning, but I was going through a pass, and it turned, and I was like, this is scary as shit.
You're a brave man. You're a brave man.
Yeah. Oh, my hands were 2 inches from the steering wheel. But I had to let it try it. So.
Yeah, I got a new Tundra pickup truck, and it doesn't do the fully autonomous, but it's got radar, so it'll pace the car in front of you. It'll watch the yellow and the white lines.
Yeah.
And I take my hands off of it, and I'm like, I can get through probably a third to a half of a trip and not touch the steering wheel.
Yeah,
it's crazy.
It is. It's insane. But do you trust it?
Even the gas pedal, like the gas and the brake, I don't have to do it because it's pacing with radar, what's in front of me, and I'm just we're steadily moving toward this. And you know what? I can't say we're just floating brains. We're only going to be good for that, because we're not going to be good for that either, because machine learning is going to outthink us.
Yeah, it'll replace your brain.
Yeah, I don't know what we're going to do. We need universal basic income, or Andrew Yang we should talk about.
Yep. It's all a funny thing with the autonomous cars. They said, here in the future, not far from now, we're going to have old people, extremely old people, just show up to their destination dead. Like they go on this trip and they fucking die, and their car delivers them to their spot.
Oh my God!
You know?
Yeah, because they're not necessary for any of the travel
they
movement
just fall
or
asleep
decisions.
and don't wake up. You know? Oh,
Deliver the corpse back. Oh my God!
So, anyway.
All right, guys. Well, let's go to break. Then we'll come back. I know, Phil, we were just talking before we hit record, everybody, about this ridiculous humidity and heat wave and how things just seem different from in the past and, probably are different. And then what do you do about it? I know Jarrell says tough it. No, we'll find out. Hey, everybody. Iron Radio is back and in an expanded way. What can you expect? Well, first, you can get it simulcast every week on the nutritionradio.org network as well as on the original podcast. It'll appear regularly on iTunes, Spotify, and all your favorite podcasting sites. We have a new Iron Radio / Nutrition Radio Facebook page as well. Please check us out. We're even backed up on YouTube. Second, please tell your friends who are longtime loyal listeners that they may see emails that share just the episode link and the show notes. This is a new thing, and we hope it will build community. Third, if you were a supporting member in the past, we may prompt you to resume through PayPal, but we will confirm each and every donor before reinstating that membership category. We'll never just restart your $4 auto payments without agreement from you. And of course, we will accept new members moving forward as well. Starting back slowly and honorably is the goal. And lastly, expect the sister show Nutrition Radio to expand into once weekly 45 to 60 minute episodes with guest co-hosts covering the same nerdy nutrition news that's been broadcast for a few months now in daily 10-minute clips. We hope that an expanded presence will get you the news, education, banter, and guests that's made Iron Radio's community so loyal from the start. You are appreciated.
We don't do anything. You're going to sweat when you get in here.
Yeah.
As far as our training this week for our regular stuff has been a lot lighter. Like I don't do any crazier conditioning type stuff in this weather, this type of heat. But as far as training itself, no, the standard is the standard. So we train.
Yeah.
Garage doors are open. I might turn the fan on. It kind of depends because sometimes the fan just blows in hot air though. So
yeah.
Well, that's the toughest thing. Like with my football team, they decided to move us indoors one day. And so normally we practice on the field, of course. They're like, it's hot, so we're going to move indoors. Like we literally moved into a place like mine that has no air conditioning. So it was just hotter. Like you were just stuck in stagnant air. It was 106 degrees with no airflow. And it was like, This is worse. At least we get outside. The air's moving around. I don't know. For us, it's just like with the kids, all we do is take more water breaks. Instead of every 30 minutes, give them every 15 minutes. Run over, get water. Just make sure they're hydrated. And other than that, it's with sport activities like that, it's going to happen. And you got to be ready for it. And you look at, there's been a lot in the news lately of Andy Reid and the Chiefs and how he still runs an old school training camp. And it beats the shit out of them. But you see the results in the season.
Yeah, they're ready.
They're ready, they're conditioned, and come the end of the season, they can handle it. And there's something to be said for that. It's like you have to tough out these days just to be a tougher human. And if we go back in time and look at 100 years ago, farmers didn't just, it's hot, not working today. That wasn't a fucking option. You just had to deal with it. If it's hot or rainy, the field still needs tended. So that coal mine wasn't digging itself.
Yeah. The only thing I would add is just the expectations. It's part of why I like the heat. I don't get too crazy about going super cold or anything like that because I think it's worse for training. But coming to the gym with the expectation of comfort. There's something to me that is there about I don't expect to be comfortable. I'm gonna train it just gives you helps you build you some grit.
Yes.
And then, even talking to Sean and Gabby, they're in the wintertime in Montana. They're it's we got a little space heater in there, but other than that, and it's but guess what? And this is just from talking to them at the, at that little conference was it's like they're consistent training people, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, so they, people who are willing to, at least forego the comfort and show up, that says something. And the people who can do that tend to show up more often long term than
Yes.
people who are, the expectation of comfort just changes the game a lot.
Well, and in sport and in lifting, like, it's inherently not a comfortable activity.
No.
And you have to get used to that. That's what we have to tell our kids. Like, this is not supposed to be comfortable. Like, we're trying to push you out of your comfort zone. It's like we talk about with training all the time. Like, with my training, I always tried to make the training harder than the meet. Because then you get to meet day, and it's like, this is a break. I only got to lift 9 things. And like 9 lifts. This is simple. It's like a day off. You get used to that hard training, and it makes competition easy. And you're just a tougher individual. So there's something to be said for that. To a point. Like, I don't want to run these kids to where they're puking and dying. But, like, you have to have some grit to you. Especially, I mean, like I tell my kids in football, it's like you're playing a inherently, like, dangerous sport. Like, it's an aggressive, dangerous sport. Get used to it, and telling them, like, most people that get injured are the ones that are going half-ass. When you got one guy going full speed and another guy slacking, it's usually the slacker that gets hurt if they collide with each other. It's like, we need full speed tempo all the time. And whenever we're practicing game speed stuff. So,
yeah, I was just looking at revisiting some of this stuff about acclimatization versus acclimation. Yeah. Apparently, the acclimatization stuff is just more like natural climate environment versus acclimation, which is sometimes defined as like lab stuff in a chamber to force yourself to adapt. Mike, do you recall, was it about 10 days? You do the flexibility stuff, physiological flexibility. Is it about 10 days to actually acclimatize?
Yeah, I would say most of the research I've read is 10 to 14 days, probably right around there. Mm-hmm. And I noticed that in my own training for years. Like, I could not figure out, like, why I had this huge drop in performance every spring. Mm-hmm. So I went back and looked at all my training journals, and I'm like, yeah, it was always, right around this, 4 to 6 week time period. And then I went back and historically looked at the changes in weather, because I lived in the garage. And I realized the times that my performance was worse is when it went from relatively cold, low humidity, and we would spike up and have these, 3, 4, 5 days of it being super warm and humid.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I realized I'm just not used to it. So I don't do any sauna stuff in the off season. So I started doing, sauna, steam room stuff at least once a week in the off season, or we travel somewhere warm or whatever. And I realized it was just that about 2 weeks later, I would be fine. Yeah. It's like, just, getting used to that temperature again. It's like,
mm-hmm. What always freaked me out was you hear about these football players in the summer in particular, their core temperature gets super high. And yeah, you're sweating away. That fluid's coming from somewhere, right? You're losing plasma volume. Your heart has to work harder. I mean, none of us are saying that, just suck it up while some kid's laying there turning various colors of the rainbow and gasping. That's because, the helmet, the pads, all the stuff that prevents evaporation. If that's your number one way to cool off, I mean, it carries away, 580 kcal worth of heat per liter, whatever. It's huge. And if you can't evaporate it, or if the environment's 99% humidity, like it has been here in the Midwest, it doesn't go anywhere. There's nowhere. It's roll-off sweat that kind of didn't do its job. It just dehydrated you. So you can see why what you wear matters, humidity in the dew point and the heat index and all that stuff. It matters. It's a lot of additional workload on the heart and all that kind of stuff. But point taken. But on the flip side, you could overreact to this. Like in beginning exercise science or sports nutrition books, they'll talk about what percent of your body weight can you dehydrate and be okay. And essentially they're saying any amount will increase workload, make it more difficult, that kind of thing. But typically, I mean, let's face it, athletes will lose more than 1 or 2% of their body weight. I certainly did when I was in bodybuilding. I would dehydrate before I competed. I know that's not good, and I'm not recommending it. And, I could feel my heart kind of pounding at night because I just dropped more, let's just say more than 10 pounds and feel like, no, you've lost way more than that. Now, it's proportional to your body size, of course, right? Yeah. I mean, a 280-pound, 300-pound guy, it's remarkable how much you'll see some of them dehydrate. And that's not from the heat, different thing. But again, it comes with the package of all this heat and humidity. You're sweating away. It's not evaporating, especially in these humid environments. It's just ugly stuff. But you can't be so soft that you don't expose yourself to it a little, because then you never will acclimatize.
Yeah, you'll never adapt. And that's part of it. I mean, and I personally, like Mike said, you'll get a drop-off come the first hot days.
Yeah.
But in general, I train better. Like, I don't mind the heat. Once you get a little, like, my joints just feel so much better. And I know that, like, it's only, like, today. I'm going to go in there. It's going to be hot. And it's 2 hours, man. If I can't handle it, like, there's something wrong. You know? So, and I know I train better. But at the same time, I also don't eat. Like, come summertime when it's hot as shit, it's like my appetite goes to hell. And that's why I always did meats. Like, even though I trained better in the summer, I did meats in the winter because I could eat. I couldn't get up to 275 in the summer. It just didn't happen. You know, I'm craving salads and things like that, not rich, like chicken fried steak with mashed potatoes. Like, I don't want that. That's fucking 107 out. You know, so
you're such a Midwestern chicken fried steak.
Oh,
you know, when
amazing.
I came out to your place, Phil, I remember going to breakfast with you guys. I'm like, damn, like you're right. You eat like farmers. You know, you guys are eating like piles of omelets and hash browns and gravy.
Oh, yeah.
Like,
Yeah, there's no avocado toast around here. It's
we do that.
It's fucking kale and avocado toast. That ain't happening here.
Okay.
So,
you know, that's kind of proof. I always argue that where I live in Northeast Ohio, that we're more East Coast than we are Midwest, and this is kind of proof of that, right? Because you go to these, especially these corporate centers, these metropolitan centers, and they're not eating like I see you guys do. You know, like to me, even Minnesota, Mike, was much more Midwestern.
Totally.
And Kansas is almost the heart of it all with that, you know. So that's funny.
Yeah, but I think there's something that, I mean, changing your mindset. I mean, I lifted this past week. The heat index was 103. I just, on principle, I don't have a fan in the garage because what am I going to do? Just blow more hot air around anyway? I got enough chalk dust in the air, and it doesn't really seem to make any difference. But I think there's something about you're going to the gym to be uncomfortable. That's just part of it. And the more comfort I have in my life, like I love having my AC. I love having my bed that has a chili pad that cools the water when I sleep at night. So I'm not against comfort, but I think going the other extreme to get some training effect in the gym, I do almost the opposite. I have a freezer I filled with 44-degree water to sit in because primarily it's the other extreme. It's very, very cold. Like it's not heated. In the winter, it's heated to 45 degrees just so I don't frostbite myself on the damn bars. You know, but it's, I think knowing that you're also doing things that other people are probably not going to do, I think can be a positive mindset too. And I'm under no illusions that when it's 103 heat index and the sweat's already running down my arms onto the bar for a grip exercise, that it's going to be an amazing PR day. But I know if I can just do an average level performance, when the temp drops again and it's not, 100% humidity, that's going to transfer. And I'm going to see a performance increase at that point because your hand interface on the bar is better. So and again, we've talked about this ad nauseum in the past. You just look at all the old gyms in history. Like none of them had air conditioning. Like some of them were barely heated. It's usually like a dungeon where it's extremely cold or extremely hot. It's just not the most pristine environment. And I think there's something about both the physical and the mindset that goes into doing work in those places that just transfers to lots of other aspects of your life.
God, that's so true, Mike. I wonder if this is an age-related thing. I mean, Pep's Gym, where I trained all those years, no AC at all.
Oh.
I mean, it's literally next to an auto body shop, and we'd lift in freaking fumes and vapors. I'm not recommending this, but it's a different mindset. Yeah, and he's got those hanging old industrial like furnace heater thingies in the corner, that kind of work, and nobody thought about it because you're there. Your mindset, like you said, is so
nobody
focused.
Complained. That was just the deal.
No, that's just how it worked.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, what I would consider more of a blue collar. This is not some corporate white collar environment. I'm not saying those are impossible to make gains in, but there is something soft about it. Yeah, including the mindset. Yeah.
Yeah, Darrell remembers at the gym I trained at before I went to Arizona to be a strength coach here. Like the old guy, like I would squat in the winter next to the window, and there'd be ice on it from my sweat.
Yeah.
Like the steam come, like there'd be a layer of ice. And the guy, like his excuse was trying to make you tough. No, he was just broke and couldn't afford heat.
That's
but
it.
Like his
Yep.
pipes froze and everything. But that's the way it was. You know, it was an old hardcore gym that was barely getting by, and he's like, "We're just not running heat. It's negative 23 in here. Train, motherfucker." You just did what you had to do, and you know, part of that is just mental toughness. I mean, it just is what it is. Like training is not supposed to be comfortable, and
I mean, just in terms of like success, you look at, there's always a team in like every either sport or thing that has like tremendous amount of success, but like, we would just say tragic conditions that they're training under or something like,
Oh yeah.
you know. And so like in jiu-jitsu, there's a team, I think it's in Illinois, that I think they train out of this old laundromat. It's called like Daisy Fresh. They call it the Daisy Fresh Group because they didn't change the sign. And it's just some old wrestling mats, like, you know, but they're a dominant team. And part of it is just because like that, you look at, you know, obviously the Patriots, I would even include the Chiefs in that because of the press recently where like Eric Bieniemy is getting heat in Washington because they're like, oh, he's too hard on us. It's like, you guys sucked.
yeah. Like there's a reason you lost. You know?
And so, I mean, just in terms of like the success leaving clues, and something that kind of reminded me of like when I first started, I was reading, it was old Mark Twight stuff, like with the old Jim Jones, like website or whatever. I just like the stuff, but something that always kind of stuck with me was that the mind drags the body forward, not the other way around. So it's like, if you eliminate the idea of there's something more comfortable, you just eliminate it completely, and then you're just so solely focused on the task. It only enhances your ability to like do the task. There's no distraction. There's no like, you know, you don't have another step to like get out of that's danger necessarily, not danger, but the discomfort. And so I just always thought there was something to that.
Well, and how many times have any of us been to an event, a game, a lifting competition, where something went wrong?
Like all of them?
Like exactly. Like all of a sudden, it's not perfect. And what do? Like if all you've done is train imperfection, you're going to mentally be fucked up. Whereas if you're used to imperfection, like if you're used to the heat, you're used to this, like it's no big deal. You know, it's just getting these athletes ready for non-perfect conditions. Like if all of a sudden it's fucking snowing and you're playing in Chicago, well, guess what? You know, there's a reason why those teams win. Like there's a reason why the Bears don't have a dome. It helps them win. They're used to it, and the teams from South come up there and they lose because they're not used to those conditions. Or here in the Midwest, they're not used to the heat and humidity. You know?
Yeah. This is almost an argument for Mike's flexibility stuff, right? You have to be able
Perfect
to
argument.
accommodate
a flexible organism.
Kind of by definition.
You know, you need to be an organism that's adaptable under any conditions.
I will say this, though. I mean, we were just saying how things seem different. I do think you have to at least keep an eye. Like, we're not talking about, like, let's pretend back in the day what we're talking about. It might have been 90 degrees with 90% humidity. Well, what if now it's 118 with 99% humidity?
Yeah.
You could be crossing certain thresholds where, you know, this is not cool anymore.
Unsafe now.
Well, of course. And I think we've gotten smarter with that. Like, it wasn't long ago when I was younger, you'd hear about high school kids dropping dead in football. Yeah. I think we do a better thing, I hope we do, of just paying attention to our kids and knowing, like, oh, it's time for a break. It's time for a drink. You know, we don't want to kill them. We want to make them tougher. You know, there's a point of where you take the adaptation too far and the organism is no longer with you. You know, we need to keep them alive, but it's giving them enough of that stimulus to adapt and overcome and become stronger mentally and physically.
It kind of is just the mindset of using the environment to like punish rather than you're just in the environment and it's just like you're not attached to the punishment of whatever the exercise is or whatever. So some of that just is like the underlying philosophy behind it.
Yes.
And like how intense you are about that. But yeah, I mean, old football practices, I mean, we should be done with those a long time ago.
Yeah, 2-a-days and fucking super massive heat. And yeah, no. I mean, and that's like I said, like we still practiced. We backed off. But we're getting them used to the environment. Like our practice went way downscale. But it's like we need to be used to this heat. And because it could happen. You know, we start in 2 weeks. There's a good chance it's going to be 100 degrees on one of our games. And hopefully the other kids didn't practice at all. And we did. We're used to it. You know, we're going to use that as an advantage. Mm-hmm. Like use anything you can to your advantage. So,
you know, my bias, I think, from a nutrition perspective would be provide the water. American College of Sports Medicine says, you know, have a coffee cup to a coffee cup worth of water, like every 20 or 30 minutes. Yep. Expose yourself to the heat, you know, if you have to up to within reason, heat and humidity, but keep the fluids coming because I just don't see a lot of reason to force dehydration. I remember when I was a middle school kid, the wrestling coach, and man, people would lose their jobs for this now. He'd pack the thermostat in ice because it was one of those old, you know, mercury tilt kind of thermometer things. And it was, I don't even know how hot it was in there. And the stuff that we did, the heat and humidity, and basically it was like, no, you don't get water. You know, don't be a wuss. And I don't think you can get away with that much anymore.
No.
I mean, and there's not much reason. You're already under a lot of training stress.
Yeah.
I don't know about putting a bunch of dehydration stress and getting all of the associated hormonal responses and all that. I say hydrate them while they start to acclimatize, you know.
I agree. And one, I'm here preaching about being tough on athletes and things like that, but I will be the first one to say, like, especially high school wrestling, like it's made steps in the right direction. They don't allow the suits anymore, the sweatsuits and things like that. And in my personal opinion, you shouldn't be cutting a shitload of weight in high school.
Oh.
It just shouldn't happen. I see it all the time. These kids like, you need to stay 145 pounds for all 4 years of high school. Like, I'm fucking growing, dude. You know?
Yeah, I'm 6 inches taller.
Yeah, they try and keep these kids like, you're our 145 wrestler. Well, no, I'm not anymore. And let these kids advance. You know, it's the same thing, and you see it in powerlifting and weightlifting. I've seen people not make progress because they get stuck to a weight class.
Yeah. And
they stay there too long. And like in the old days, you used to see people went up. Like if you started as a 181er, next year they're at 198, next year they're at 242. You know, you'd see this progress of the people, and then, you know, at the end of the day, they're Dan Bell and they're a super heavyweight. You know, they've gone through this progress of years of training, and guess what? Their weight went up as they did it. And today we see too many people get tied to a weight class and limit their progress. But there's a point to it. Like, it shouldn't be punishment. It's just getting acclimated to the environment. So,
yeah. I think the transfer you see is a one-way transfer. So if you train in a perfect environment, everything is automatically, you know, controlled and everything else. If you have anything that deviates from that, you're just not prepared for it. But if you do the opposite, if you train with different temperatures, obviously I'm biased because I have the whole physiologic flexibility. You train at different temperatures, pH, you know, fuel systems, CO2, you know, oxygen uptake, which, you know, modified via exercise, you're going to be prepared if something's easier. Like the other way just doesn't work.
Yeah. Well, it's no different than, I know Jarrell's seen it. We've talked about it on the show. You have athletes now that are so used to perfection in training that, like, they'll show up and ask you if you have calibrated plates to train with.
Yeah.
Like, no, come on. You know, like the meets I started at, they didn't have calibrated plates. We had those old cast iron freaking 100-pound plates, and they're like, oh, is that really 405? Well, I don't know. It's somewhere in the ballpark.
No, there's like clock marks in them.
You know, they literally used to have to weigh the bars after world record attempts to see what it really weighed to make sure they broke a record. You know? And it would never be like, it's supposed to be 415. It's 423 and a quarter. You know, so
they can get off your lawn.
Yeah.
Yes. Kids, get off my damn lawn.
I had to mow my goddamn yard. It was 110 degrees. I had to mow it. The fucker still needed mowing.
Here we go.
I mean, I had this happen. So one of my college kids, he came back and he was like, oh man, you know, I go to Genesis sometimes or whatever. He's like, there's a bunch of, you know, kids over there who are training. He's like, you would have you have a bunch of powerlifters in here if you had some powerlifting equipment. And I was like, you motherfucker, like bars and plates like that.
Yep.
Like what kind of equipment do you need? I got squat racks, bars, plates. What is the,
All you need.
what's the equipment?
Yep. Could you imagine Ed Cohn fucking going in a gym and asking for calibrated plates? It didn't happen.
That's funny. Yeah, I can imagine that.
Yeah.
And
So,
here's a news flash. Like, if you want to get precise and know what your lifting is, like I have a calibrated freight scale, because for some of the grip lifts, it's, half a pound makes a big difference.
Yeah.
And I just want to know for my own records. You just take your non-calibrated plates and you put it on there and it tells you the weight.
yeah. Oh, yeah. For a little while, I had all my plates. I'd weighed every plate I had, and I marked them.
You can mark them with
And
tape.
none of them were 45 pounds. Like, none of my 45s were 45. And I ended up having to race that shit because everybody paid attention to it. They were trying to search down I need that plate because it's 43. No, motherfucker, lift. So I covered that shit up, because everybody just took it too serious. It's like, it doesn't matter that much. And honestly, I think out of like the 40, 45s I had, only 2 of them were light. The rest of them were heavy.
Yeah.
And you start going 2 to 3 pounds heavy and you got 7, 8 plates per side, that makes a difference. And I think that was a big part of why, like, I'd have 700, 800 pound squatters and they'd go to a meet and they're like, man, this feels heavy. Well, or it feels light. Yeah, it probably is 20, 30 pounds lighter. That's why. You trained in your max squat in the gym was 7, but it was actually 725. So 7 in the meet feels light. So.
Or you get one of the super stiff deadlift bars, or I've been actually doing mixed grip deadlift with my 2-inch axle, which has no flex to it at all. And it sticks out in front of your shin farther. And I'm like, this is like the worst of the worst case scenarios.
Yep. And that's
most people don't need to go that extreme, but yeah.
And that used to be a thing. Like, make training harder. Like, we used to purposely adapt things to make it harder. And now it's like, if it's not perfect, I can't even train. You don't have calibrated plates. How am I supposed to? This is sacrilege. I can't train in this environment. So, like, come on.
The toilet bowl is your chalk container. What's going on?
Yep.
The last thing I would add with fluid, make sure people actually include some electrolytes too, because you will lose a lot of sodium. You will lose a lot of other electrolytes too. And some people can make up for it if they're using salt on their diet and all that kind of stuff. So I'm not saying you always need it 100% of the time, but I've come across more and more athletes lately who are eating very clean and kind of got it in their head that sodium is bad. And I look at their total sodium intake for the day. They're not salting their food. It's like less than 2 grams. And we dramatically increase their sodium and electrolytes. And they're like, oh my God, I perform so much better.
No, I will say that's one of the things. Yeah, that's one of the things the supplement industry has done lately. Like the elements and things like that.
I have in the right direction.
I have like 10 cases of element out in the other room.
Me too.
That we drink, and it's great shit. It helps. I don't drink it much in the winter, but once it heats up, man, I'm slamming it because I go out there and I sweat a lot. So,
if you want to get super crazy, I've used the NIX sensor. It's NIX, and that will tell you how much fluid and how much electrolytes you're losing. So for some of the higher end athletes and through Rapid Health, we do use that with some athletes because it will vary quite a bit. And if you've got athletes that have to perform under high level conditions in extreme environments, like I've seen pretty big differences from one athlete to the next just on how much they lose. And these are people who are generally have already acclimated and everything else too. So there is a fair amount of variability with it.
Mm-hmm. So, all right, guys. Well, good show.
Yeah.
We will call it a day and see y'all next week. Get out in the heat and train. Don't be a pussy.
Is that the new show title?
Yep. So.
IronRadio is accepting donations. If you like what we do, the professors, the scientists, the bodybuilding show promoters, the athletes themselves in powerlifting and bodybuilding, please consider making a donation. We also are accepting supporting members. So for $4 a month, which is frankly less than the bank sneaks out of your account in fees, you can step up and support a form of sort of public radio for the bodybuilding and powerlifting and strength community.
The Iron Radio podcast and all of the audio on ironradio.org is for informational purposes only. If you're interested in starting a diet or exercise program, it's important to check with your physician. Also seek the help of registered dietitians, athletic trainers, and qualified exercise physiologists in order to make the progress that you need.